Hey everyone, welcome back to Callie and Beans Books. I'm Brittany, and today I'm going to talk about audiobooks and some of my favorites and why I've liked them. So I have been using Audible. By no means is this going to be an Audible advertisement or me trying to push this is the platform you should use. I've just found a lot of success with the Audible and the books that I've found. So I'm going to go through some of the books I have purchased, as well as some of the audiobooks that are included in my subscription. The first series I want to mention is ACOTAR by Sarah J. Maas. This is, of course, one of my favorite series. I absolutely adore everything about this world. I did a reread of it earlier this year. However, it was more of a re-listen. Overall, I absolutely adore these audiobooks as well. The first read through I physically read them. The second time I listened to them. In my opinion, I think reading it is better. There is definitely a difference between the world building and how you imagine the world when you're reading versus when you're listening to it. The only negative I have about the audiobooks for ACOTAR is we switch narrators between ACOMAF and ACOWAR. So we get a different narrator, and it's not awful. Realistically, they tell the story very similar and their tone of voice is very similar. It's not in your face. I just noticed it because I listened to all of them in a row versus if I listen to one and then a year or so goes by and then I listen to the next one. I probably wouldn't have noticed, but I listened to all of them. So after completing ACOTAR, I jumped into A Court of Silver Flames, which is narrated by Stina Nilsson, and her tone of voice is completely different than the women that narrated ACOTAR, which is totally fine because we have a completely different story. So getting a completely different voice to voice Nesta was understandable, and I think she did a really good job. It just took me a little bit to get into it because the tone of voice was completely different. Don't get me wrong, there were moments where I'm like, I don't like this narrator, but at the same time, I couldn't be picky. I do plan on reading A Court of Silver Flames physically instead of listening to it as well. I just haven't had a chance. The next two books I want to mention are All the Stars and Teeth and All the Tides of Fate by Adalyn Grace. The narrator did change from the first one to the second one, and that's my biggest issue with these audiobooks. I absolutely love Shayna Small, who narrated All the Stars and Teeth. She did an amazing job. The characters were amazing. She painted the world beautifully, and I definitely enjoyed listening to her read the story. However, All the Tides of Fate is narrated by Natalie Naudus. She did okay. I wasn't a huge fan. All the Tides of Fate, there are moments where I was not into the story, and I don't know if it's because I didn't physically read it and I was stuck on not liking the narrator, or if it was just the story in general. So I do plan on rereading the story physically. I just didn't have time to read when I was into this story. So that's why I listened to it. But it definitely threw me off not having the same narrator. That gave me a different perspective on the story. So I definitely want to read All the Tides of Fate to see if my opinions when I listen to it are the same when I physically read it. But we'll see. The next ones I'm going to talk about are all books that I found through Audible Plus. So they were included in my subscription. I don't know if you can find these audiobooks in other platforms, but I just know that they're included in Audible Plus. So if you do subscribe to Audible and are kind of looking through, not sure what story you want, these are a couple that I do recommend. Of course, if you have not already read the Once Upon a Con series by Ashley Poston, highly recommend them. Those, of course, are Geekarella, Princess and the Fangirl, and Bookish and the Beast. These are amazing stories. I love the narration. These are dual perspectives. So we get dual narrators as well. So getting that different perspective from the male and the female point of view, and then of course the two female leads in Princess and the Fangirl, we get all of these different perspectives. These characters are just beautifully done, and I loved the stories. So I definitely recommend, if you haven't already, check these books out. Whether you physically read them or listen to the audiobooks, they're perfect. I really enjoyed them from beginning to end. Each book has its own drama, and it was so well done, and I absolutely love them. I can't speak enough of the Once Upon a Con series. I wish I would have picked it up earlier, but I'm so glad I picked it up because it was definitely what I needed at the time of listening to them. The next series I want to talk about is the Extra series by Megan Walker and Janci Patterson. There's 3 books in this series. There's The Extra, The Girlfriend Stage, and Everything We Are. The first one follows a single perspective, which is Gabby. The middle child and her older sister is very academically accomplished. Her younger brother is an amazing artist, plays the cello, and he's actually going to Juilliard for it. So she just kind of floats through life, and she's not really sure where she fits in. She's held these dead-end jobs. She doesn't really know what she wants to do with life. Her best friend and roommate, Anna Marie, is an actress, and she just got a starring role in a daily soap opera, and and invites her to be an extra on the show, see how she likes it. And Gabby actually falls in love with the life of being an extra. She's not needing to commit to anything. She just shows up and does what she needs to, and she finds that she's really good at it. Then she bumps into one of her former managers, Will, and he's actually a screenwriter for the show. However, he is engaged to the director's assistant, who is not the nicest on set, and in turn, Gabby feels very awkward with trying to be Will's friend and tiptoe around her having feelings for him. There's a lot that happens. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but a lot of things kind of blow up in their faces. So it would have been interesting to have that dual perspective with Will throughout the entire story, because he's dropping hints and he wants to make things more than just friends, but he doesn't know how to do that, especially being engaged. So it was very interesting. I did really enjoy the story. In the second one, the girlfriend stage, we follow Anna Marie and her casual hookup, Josh, and they both have feelings for each other, but they're also afraid of commitment. So it is an interesting setup to the relationship. Anna Marie has her family reunion in Wyoming, so she heads back to her very small town, middle of nowhere life that she was happy to get away from. And Josh surprises her. So the story is set up to be funny, but it also has some serious drama, and it turns out to be this amazing story. It is dual perspective, so we have dual narrators, and I really enjoyed that. Like I said, that is definitely something that was missing in the extra. So having that dual perspective between the both characters and seeing how they feel, I'm a sucker for it. So I adored the story. Getting Anna Marie's fun personality, but also seeing where she came from and how she grew to be the person she is. Definitely loved it. In Everything We Are, we follow Felix, who is Gabby's younger brother, and we follow his recovery. So it doesn't show any scenes of him actually using drugs. However, it does go through the details of his recovery. He meets Jenna, who is the female vocalist in a duo, Alec and Jenna, and everyone knows them as this power couple, and they're seen to be in love. However, when Felix joins their band, part of his NDA is Alec and Jenna are no longer together. They've been broken up for about a year. However, they decided to stay together in the face of the world so that they can continue their band and continue with rising their careers. Of course, you kind of know what's coming. We do follow Jenna and Felix as they fall for each other, try to hide their feelings, try to hide their relationship. This story was very predictable. Going into it, you kind of knew exactly what was going to happen. You just didn't know when it was going to happen. So the drama and the conflicts are kind of building, and you know what's going to come, but you didn't know when. And I thought the turning point of the story was really interesting. I really did enjoy the entire series, but Everything We Are was my favorite. This one had me laughing and crying and really rooting for these characters to succeed, and I think it was so well done. So I highly recommend checking out this series, especially if you are in between reads and in between credits and you're not really sure what you're in the mood for. If these stories do have a little bit more smut, less fade to black, more explicit detail, I will say that. Depending on what your level of comfort is when it comes to smut, especially an audiobook, it can be very different between listening and reading it. I will say that. But overall, I did really enjoy this series. The next audiobook I want to mention is Son of a Beach by Mia Sosa. And this is a novella, so it's shorter. I really enjoyed this story. It definitely gave me the Unhoneymooners vibe. We're following two characters that work for a magazine and they don't get along, but they're sent on this getaway to shoot a swimsuit edition to rival Sports Illustrated. However, the creative director changes it last minute. Instead of it being female models, they're male swimsuit models. And he poses them the way females are. It's an expose on how women are treated in swimsuit editions, which I thought was a really interesting concept. It was a really fun turn of events, and I really enjoyed the setup of the story. Definitely enemies to lovers. That's why I think I was comparing it a lot to the Unhoneymooners. I did really enjoy it from beginning to end. I didn't feel like we were missing anything in the story, and I definitely didn't feel like it needed to be longer. It was the perfect amount of time, so I really enjoyed listening to the story and highly recommend it. The last two that I'm going to mention are audiobooks that I enjoyed but didn't absolutely love. The first one is Friends Without Benefits by Penny Reid, and I found out after the fact that this is actually the second. They're all standalone, but they're all companion novels to each other, so I didn't realize that this was a companion novel until I finished it and was looking at books that Audible recommended I check out, and then I realized, oh, this says book 2. So I do have plans to check out the other characters and their other stories. A lot of the romance didn't feel natural. It felt forced, There were pieces of the puzzle that were missing until like the very end, and I just felt like the ending was rushed. There was a lot of buildup, a lot of tension. It was a little repetitive, and then we get this big conflict, and then all of a sudden there's a resolution. It was one of those stories that I wish we had a little bit less in some parts and a little bit more towards the end in the resolution. I will also say that their relationship between the two main characters was a little toxic. There were moments where I'm like, this doesn't seem right. There's a lot of resentment that really wasn't taken care of. Like, it just felt like the characters shouldn't have been together to begin with. That was a little weird, trying to connect with these characters and see where they were coming from. So that was a downside to it. Overall, I did enjoy the story, and I do plan on checking out the rest in the series. The last book I want to mention is Back in the Burbs by Avery, Flynn, and Tracy Wolff. I enjoyed this story. It's not my favorite. The reason I want to mention it is it was one where it's a full-length story, but felt like it could have been shortened to a novella. There was a lot in the middle of the story that was just repetitive and kept circling back to the same point. It felt like we were just stagnant, that we weren't moving on with the story. We were just repeating a lot of the scenes with different characters and different conversations. I did enjoy it because as soon as I felt like maybe I won't continue it, the pace picked up. So those are the audiobooks that I wanted to mention, and I would love to hear your thoughts. If you've listened to these or if there's other recommendations that you have, please drop a comment below. I'll respond when I can, and I will definitely keep you all posted on the other audiobooks that I listen to. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. We post new videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and some Sundays. Head over to Goodreads and Instagram. All of our joint and individual accounts will be linked in the description below. Until next time, bye!